So, hello. Yeah, let us start the class. Basically, I'll be trying to give a very insightful in a way, but also brief overview about the early modern plays till Shakespeare. And apart from that, we'll be doing another session like on Old English Poetry Part 2. So already you have followed, already you have tried to understand, you have seen the material regarding Old English Poetry Part 1. So this is about Old English Poetry Part 2. But before that, let us take a look. एक बार देख लेते हैं early modern plays, ठीक है, till Shakespeare. So first, already we have read about a few authors, ठीक है, about Old English poetry. Early modern plays. My bad. Well, but let us try to look at a few other important authors. But before that, let me give a quick trajectory. Okay, one second. Let me show you this. Okay, so where we'll be moving in Elizabethan England. Okay, this is a very larger period. Now we'll try to take a look at some of the works in Elizabethan England, and then obviously in the Jacobean era and post-Jacobean era, mainly in the 17th century. So where we are now somehow structured in the 16th century, we will try to focus on 16th century and then 17th century. It is very difficult to simply demarcate or distinguish, divide करना बहुत difficult हो जाता है. इसीलिए difficult हो जाता है क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं 16th सेंचुरी में जो थिएटर आप देखोगे, ड्रामा देखोगे, उसका एक इंपॉर्टेंट कंटिन्यूएशन 17th सेंचुरी में होता है. लेकिन एक क्विक ट्रेजेक्टरी देख लेते हैं एलिजाबेथन पीरियड. सो पहले देखो 1530 थी. एलिजाबेथ वन वाज बोर्न, डॉटर ऑफ हेनरी 7. ओके, सो दे in the 15th century, what you could see, they are not all the kings and the queens are not English born. Okay, they have different blood connections, and they have different blood connections with the royal families of different arenas, different places, but somehow they have ruled England. And what I have already mentioned before, ke three main stakeholders are, three important stakeholders you could find. देखो, three important stakeholders कौन कौन है? Three stakeholders अगर देखो ध्यान से, ये concept clarifications बहुत important हो जाता है. तो एक तो चर्च, second the parliament was established, and the third was royal family. So ये stakeholder ध्यान में रखना, ये stakeholder मत भूलना, क्योंकि you could see how the conflict actually among these three sort of shaped the age. And you can find also the development of Protestant religion, which was also a very important part of Christianity. But beforehand, there was Catholic. Okay. So with the development of parliament, instead of Catholic, mystic or church dominated religion, the parliament started dominating. Okay. So yes. Then 1530, another thing, 1547, Henry VIII is succeeded by Edward VI. Then if you see 1554, Sir Thomas Wyatt leads Protestant uprising. So as you can see, I have already mentioned a Protestant uprising, you can see. Then 1559, Act of Uniformity. Catholic mass becomes illegal. So the domination of Protestant became vindicated. Then 1570, अगर देखोगे, Elizabeth I is excommunicated by the Catholic Church. But 1572, Bartholomew's Day massacre हो रहा है, कहीं ना कहीं एक French Protestant group and obviously Catholic group में conflict. And then 1583, Queen Company is formed in London. आगे जाके आप देखोगे Queen Victoria is actually ruling, and somehow she is taking over the power of British East India Company. So obviously the Queen establishment that started, and Mary I publicly beheaded. Okay, then 1591 अगर देखोगे, Richard III first written and performed. It was a drama by Shakespeare, as you all know. So these are some very important events. Here also you can find that 1553, Mary I is a crowded queen, and later she was beheaded. Okay. Here you can find 1586, Mary I tried for treason for her sister and obviously beheaded. Who was the sister? Elizabeth I. Okay. And you can find the dominations of Elizabeth I kingdom. You can see the development of drama and development of theater in the Elizabethan era. Okay, because the era has been established. And this era is very important because you see the development of drama, you see the different sort of literature where the university which already have talked about, they came in front. So Marlowe is a very important figure who was born in 1564, and obviously you can find the work, I mean, till 1593. So he was born in Canterbury, which is not very important details, but where he's, what you need to remember always about reading about an author, about probably a dramatist, playwright, okay, a poet. So somehow a brief idea about the authors or the playwrights' evolutions. That's the reason this information is shared here with you, that he came to London, obviously studied in the grammar school. Okay, but he came to London, he somehow tried to find interest in Faust, who was a legendary character, and obviously about Faust, later Marlowe has written a very important piece. Faust is a character legend about the very absolute expression, absolute knowledge. Okay, he's the first one to write a drama on Faust. Very important information though. And he had a passion for pagan Renaissance, that is the ancient Greek Renaissance. And obviously, when you are talking about the Renaissance period, they have somehow got placed, or they have taken a few important elements from the pagans. That means the Greek Renaissance period. So it is sort of a repetitions or reimagination of Renaissance. Okay. And then in 1587, okay, when he was 23 years old, produced Tamburlaine, another important piece, another important drama, which is a very high literary purpose, high literary possibility. Okay. High century, we have already started. No problem, you can follow up. So talking about basically the early modern drama, and we're talking about Christopher Marlowe. I have already talked about a little bit of the trajectory of the Elizabethan period, so you can rewind, or I can obviously explain it later. So Tamburlaine is a very important piece, important dramatic piece that has been written by Marlowe in 1587 when he was at 23 years of age. Very important information, but he is a person who sort of started writing with a high literary purpose. I hope everyone can see the screen properly. Okay, now I think it's properly visible. Now, if you talk about the Marlowe's work, important poem like Hero and Linder. Okay, very important poem. We need not to pay focus much about it because we are trying to look at the drama. Okay, in the medieval or the Renaissance poem, you can definitely find this poetry or obviously the poems. The first of this is Tamburlaine. Okay, that was written by Marlowe, which is a very important piece, and you can find the story of Timur. Okay, not much information you need to collect, just know this fact. Then let us come to Faust. One second, just give me a moment. I'm really sorry. Okay, so Faust, why it is important? Because through Faust, he tried to find the ultimate scholastic expressions. Who has excelled, the character Faust himself has excelled in theology, philosophy, and medicines, law, these four sciences, that moment, which was very important, and kind of this Faust, which was already in the oral sort of literature. You can find Faust as the legend of the land. So you can find the idea of Faust being played on stage. Okay, the play is a story of those 24 years of Faust's life, and somehow you can find the break of Aristotelian dramaturgy, where Aristotle sort of tried to focus on the unity of time. That means the entire play, the event, the real life event has to be within 24 hours, where Marlowe is actually showing 24 years. Okay, that is the break from Aristotelian dramaturgy. Very important. What Aristotle wrote? Aristotle wrote his dramaturgical idea in Poetics, in a book called Poetics. So it is a break from the very old Renaissance pagan dramaturgical format, which has been the very soulful, but interestingly, a very important, I would say, the most vindictive reference for dramaturgy. If someone needs to write a play, obviously needs to follow Aristotle, but it was a break. So kind of he focused on the very Miltonic idea, or Milton's idea of Satans. Okay, in Paradise Lost, where Satan actually been dispelled from paradise for his curiosity. So the same way, Faust had some sort of very different curiosity about knowledge. So now here in the Renaissance play, Faust is not played as a negative character, but to some extent as a character who has a thirst of knowledge, who has a query, who has an inquiry. And you can see at the same time, the colonies being formed or started being formed gradually, because not the colonies being formed actually, but people started moving all around in search of new land. And it comes out of your queries. People are going out of the church control, which could control or which could limit people, the Catholic religion. And you can already see as a backdrop or background that the Protestant Revolution started, and that started dominating England. So what happened in the Protestant Revolution? That people started actually getting out of the church dominations, and they started creating their inquiry about new lands. And obviously, they started delimiting themselves in terms of religion or in terms of the knowledge sphere. And next play that you should focus on is the Jew of Malta, where he sort of created a prototype, which we call a prototype. एक Jew character होता है, so that becomes the prototype. Later on, you can find the influence of this prototype even in the Shakespearean drama Merchant of Venice, where Shakespeare created the character, a Jew character, Shylock, okay, in the same light of the Jew of Malta. Okay, very interesting. It has a suggestion for the character called Shylock. And Marlowe's last play, Edward II, you can see it is a chronicle. That means it actually gives you an insight or a writer's or a playwright's perspective about the national history of England. Okay. So when I say national history, already it means the genre called chronicle. Okay. Chronicle. So one of the first and important chronicles of the early modern drama. Okay. Or you can say that is also a reason for the development of English historical drama. So now we'll be looking at the various types of early modern play. One is very important. I have been talking about is chronicle play. Okay. Because there was a development of national spirit. Elizabethan period is not only the period of unifications. You can find the restoration later in the 17th century. Okay, but it is not a period of unification. It saw different layers of different magnitudes of a pandemic called plague. So which certainly created mass massacre and a problem. Elizabeth was compelled to sort of dispel, sort of like cast her like center, the capital, okay, from the city London, because plague was very oversurfacing. Plague was quite infectious that moment in London. London was not the city for the rich. Rather, London has turned out to be the city for the poorer, city for the, I mean, people who have come to the city in search of their fate. Also, you can see the industrial revolution started gradually. Okay, and London was the city base. People are coming to London because there are several theaters being grown up in London and also in the outskirts. There are public theaters, private theaters. Already I've talked about this in the previous video. And you can see several national histories in the play, in the chronicle plays, like, well, King John. Okay, it is one of the crude chronicle plays, but that moment, it was written in 1538, it was not the glory of the drama it started. Okay, Robin Hood plays, you can find the Robin Hood plays as a first tragedy that moment. Okay, you can see the popular chronicles that used to extrapolate the national history. The several Shakespearean plays. Okay, out of 37 dramas, there are 10 chronicle plays you can find. 10 chronicle plays. Okay. Other types of plays. Let us look at some other types of plays, that were happening in the 16th century England, particularly in the Elizabethan period. Like domestic drama, which was not very popular at that moment. Rather, the humor or the comedy of humor became popular in the 17th century, later 17th century. The court comedy. Court, that means a king's court, and obviously the comedy setting, the setting of the comedy actually is the court. There you can find the elaborate dialogue, just retorts and endless plays on words. That is very important. Word plays. Okay. Next, romantic comedy or romantic tragedy, very important, because you can see a lot of romantic comedies and tragedies by Shakespeare himself, as well as Peel, Green, Marlowe, who were the university wits that moment. In the previous video, in the previous lecture, I have already talked about university wits and also tried to elaborate some information related these playwrights and authors like Peel, Green, and Marlowe. Okay, there are other type of plays like classical plays, like that used to be modeled upon Seneca, like early Roman, the plays structured the way the Roman or the Senecan tragedy used to be structured, indebted to the pagan tragedy. Okay, melodrama. Melodrama became an important element in all the plays gradually. Earlier, melodrama was a separate genre. Okay. If Paris tragedy is a Senecan tragedy, already in the previous video, you must have known that its Spanish tragedy is a very important tragedy, is a Senecan tragedy, a classical tragedy. Okay. Voice is breaking sometimes. Is it audible for everyone? Just do tell me. Is it properly audible now? I think my mic is working. Okay, anybody else? काम कर रहा है mic ठीक से? सुनाई दे रहा है voice? Okay, just could you please write down in the chat if you could. Am I audible, everyone? Thank you, Sanchari. Okay, hopefully I'm audible now, right? Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Okay. Chalo, this is basically the origin and development. This is basically the origin and development of British drama till 17th century. तो हम 15th century पे कहीं ना कहीं देख रहे हैं, ठीक है? तो ये 17th century में कुछ पीरियड दिया गया है, जैसे 15th century में दिखाया था. तो you can see the restoration of Charles II that actually announces the restoration period from 1660. उसके पहले till 1630 you can see from 1600 the Jacobean period. Okay, then थोड़ा there was a lacuna you can see, and then definitely the restoration period started. So I was trying to explain this trajectory, that what happened in the 16th century. Okay, what happened or what are the major events in the Elizabethan England since 1530 to 1600. Okay, when Elizabeth died in 1603, and she was succeeded by James VI of Scotland. So that period is another turmoil I'll definitely discuss later. But mostly what you need to follow this chart to understand the important events of Elizabethan England. Okay, now there is another timeline that starts from 16th century के भाई 16th century तक तो पता चला उसको sorry 17th century का उसके बाद 17th century में क्या हो रहा है. Okay, so House of Bourgeois formed हो रहा है, then Plymouth, then Dutch found new land in 1624, very important event you can mark as an event of colonialism. Okay, you can see the Dutch in Dutch East Indian Company has also been formed in India, but later on British East India Company actually dispelled the others. Okay, so you must take a look कि क्या क्या हो रहा था. Okay, so this is also a major timeline. अब तुमको 15th century तो समझ में आ गया 15th century में क्या हुआ, लेकिन एक मेजर मोटा मोटा अगर टाइमलाइन देखोगे तो उसमें समझ में आया 15th century आया कहाँ से, उसके पहले क्या हुआ. So देखो 1016 is basically they started ruling England. उसके पहले Anglo-Saxon था, and there was some sort of divisions in the Anglo-Saxon period also, and obviously the Northumbrian that we'll try to look at obviously in the Old English poetry. Northumbrian जो था school of poetry that got diminished obviously 1000th century में, मतलब 913 के बाद से. तो obviously उसके बाद Canute they started ruling, and 1042 Edward the Confessor becomes English king, and 1016 William of Normandy conquers England. So it is the Norman conquest that started in 1066. 1154 the end of Norman dynasty. Henry II, okay, Plantagenet becomes king. Then 1170 में आओगे, ध्यान से देखो तो Thomas Becket is murdered, very important event, a political event. And then 1203-4 King John loses English possession in France. France, obviously Norman was the French kingdom, so obviously France में कहीं ना कहीं English possession गया. तो ये जो dynasty था Plantagenet dynasty that ruled obviously till 15th century till 16th century. उसके बाद Tudor dynasty. So Elizabeth I, okay, King James, all the kings and queens you can see since 16th century, they are the Tudor, they are from the Tudor dynasty. But the point is the Tudor dynasty, I mean that dynasty was the royal dynasty, so they didn't need to be limited within a land. But the English nationalism started becoming, and that was not also limited to the very geographical land that we call as England, but it became the Great Britain. It was a very collective Britain, and obviously they are from Ireland. So definitely there was some sort of disputes definitely between the royal family, the parliament, because the parliament was very much exclusive for the land. So they had a clash with the royal family who were not from the mainland of England. But Tudor dynasty established, what is very important, that dynasty established in the 16th century. Beforehand, Plantagenet dynasty, what you can look at, that 1215 King John signed Magna Carta. Okay, with definitely some other royal forces in Europe. 1258 barons rebel against Henry III, and there you can find the rebels of the feudals. Okay, 1264 the second baronial war happened. Then 1276 Edward I conquers Wales. Wales was not mainland England but part of England. 1314 Scots defeated the English at the Battle of Bannockburn. Okay, then 1328 Edward III recognizes Scottish independence. So Scotland became very independent. That became the independent land. Okay, but later on we can see the British reign in Scotland also, because it depends on the royal dynasty. A king, if the king has made Scotland free, another king could obviously make it under the mainland Britain. 1337, 100 years war begins. 1377, Richard II, grandson of Edward III, becomes king. This time you can see the development of literature, you can see the development of war. Okay, and 16th century आते आते क्या हो गया, ट्यूडर डिनेस्टी एस्टेब्लिश्ड हो गया 1535 जो ऑलरेडी देखे, एंड इंग्लैंड में प्रोटेस्टेंट रेवोल्यूशन स्टार्ट हो गया विद द एस्टेब्लिशमेंट ऑफ ट्यूडर डिनेस्टी. Okay. Sorry. Now, when we have already come roughly to William Shakespeare, because he started writing in the later 80s, 1580s, so we need to take a look at the timeline of William Shakespeare. So ध्यान से देखो, पहले 1564 he was born. Okay, then two sister था, brother था, वो अलग बात है, studied Latin, Greek, history, but he didn't study in university. That is very important. School life दिखा गया 14 to 15 years. Then marriage. Okay, then they had 3 children. What is very important, the first theater in London opened in 1576. देखो भाई, सिंपल सा बात, अगर थिएटर ऐसे ओपन नहीं होता है तो डेफिनेटली कहीं ना कहीं Shakespeare couldn't rear up the dream of become a very important playwright. So obviously the first opening of theater in London was a very remarkable event even for Shakespeare. Okay, before 1590 he moved London, worked as a, so already 1990 के पहले आ गया, प्लेराइट के तौर पे काम करना स्टार्ट किया. 93 okay, play started, and definitely उस time he started writing plays. Okay, and William wrote several short plays because हम लोग इधर पैंडेमिक होता है और सोचो थिएटर बंद है, तो जो थिएटर जो who used to write theater, और कहीं ना कहीं मूवी हॉल बंद है, जो स्क्रीन राइटर होता है वो क्या करेगा, अगर उनको लिखना ही आता है तो डेफिनेटली दे विल ट्राई टू राइट इन अ डिफरेंट जॉनर. सो डेफिनेटली ही स्टार्टेड राइटिंग सॉनेट्स. सो शेक्सपियर वाज अ वेरी कमर्शियल राइटर. डोंट थिंक कि शेक्सपियर भाई उसको विजन आता था और बैठ के लिखता था. सो दिस इज नॉट ट्रू. ही यूज्ड टू राइट फॉर द written piece, I mean for the sales. Okay, that even he used to write theater for the commercial groups, so that could sell out the tickets. Okay, if the plays are good. So Shakespeare also had built a near here called the Globe Theatre. Okay, that was opened in 1599, and Shakespeare's name has been associated with Globe Theatre, been associated with Globe Theatre forever. Okay, not Globe, it will be Globe. Okay, it had a space for 3,000 people. Imagine, women that moment didn't act. William wrote 38 plays. Very important thing that you need to remember. Questions आ जाता है, ठीक है. 38 और 37 में कंफ्यूजन रहता है, but definitely 38 में मार्क करना इतना इजी नहीं आएगा, बट कोई ऑप्शन में आ सकता है ये क्वेश्चन. Okay, so now we'll be looking at few genre. Okay, ध्यान से देखो कि what are the features of 3 important genres or genres that Shakespeare wrote, preferably comedies, histories, and tragedies. Okay, comedies, histories, and tragedies. Comedies, important for enchanted settings, separations. Please remember this. Clever servant, another important prototype character, because comedies that moment used to be written for the poor class, for the not underprivileged that way, but the poorer sections. Okay, not the royal sections, but for the poorer section, for the lower class. Okay, so clever servant he intentionally used to create because people who used to come to watch comedies, they used to throng around in front of the stage, and so they could see the character's face. Okay, from behind, from the very lower end where they used to stand, and the comedies structured by the facial expressions and the very action, because plays were very action oriented. Otherwise, people couldn't spot comedy or the comic action properly through the expression. So it was very action oriented, but there are several prototype characters like clever servant, okay, magic, mistaken identity, as you can see, comedy of errors, right? Very important place. Now we, even in Bollywood, films been produced based on mistaken identities. Very like Golmaal, a very important uh, 70s film in Bollywood. Okay, casting Utpal Dutt and Amol Palekar. So it was basically on the mistaken identity that has been revived or I mean remade again. I forgot the name. जहाँ पे अभिषेक बच्चन था and अजय देवगन था. ठीक है, I forgot the name. So even different Priyadarshan's films of Bollywood that were based upon the mistaken identities. So obviously you can find the beginning of these mistaken identities comedies, okay, by Shakespeare. And the reunion and wedding, which was a very prominent and prevalent characteristics of the new comedy. Okay, that started in the France. In France, that comedy. Histories based on real events. Like real events जब हो जाते हैं हम chronicles भी कहते हैं, ठीक है उसको. National real event. Then medieval England को कहीं ना कहीं दिखाया गया. Okay, Elizabethan social commentary, because you are talking about the national history of a certain past, or maybe some sort, but it becomes political the way you try to make a commentary on the present. Falstaff, very important character, okay, Barber Arthur, and long-winded speech, okay, because if you need to create something political as a commentary, you need to bring the long speech of particular character. Okay. Then tragedies, prophecy or destiny or spirits, which you can find in the pagan tragedy or the Greek tragedy. I'll be talking about Greek tragedy in details, okay, later. And external and familial or family pressure that you can find as a major bearing force of the tragedies. Good versus evil, that was very straight. He knew that his tragedies are for the public and they could understand the round character. Although even in the tragedy, Shakespearean tragedy, you can find such brilliant round characters like you can find in King Lear. King Lear as the victim of tragedy, King Lear as the initiator of the tragedy. So this is already the round character because somehow you yourself is the reason for your fate. What was absolutely there even in the pagan or the ancient Greek tragedy. He took the concept, he took the content, he took the stylistics, but what he also drifted away from Aristotle, that the unity of time. कि एक इवेंट 24 घंटे में होना चाहिए, 24 घंटे का इवेंट होना चाहिए जिसको स्टेज में दिखाया जाएगा. बट कहीं ना कहीं शेक्सपियर लाइक मार्लो didn't show an event of 24 hours in any way. He showed the action that spanned for long. Revenge. So most of the Shakespearean tragedies are the revenge tragedies. Another sort of tragedy that you can find always to be revenge one, which is called Senecan tragedies. Okay, the early Roman tragedies. Thomas Kidd's, Kidd's writing, the Spanish tragedy, is also a kind of Senecan tragedy. Okay, very important. Then fatal flaw, and everyone dies. Not everyone exactly, but you can see a lot of important characters dying. If you closely look at, again, the timeline of Shakespeare's works, so you can find this chart here. Okay, please take a look. What ये चार्ट इतना डिफिकल्ट नहीं है पढ़ने के लिए, आप देख लो एक बार. मैं और एक चार्ट obviously I have tried to focus on, but you can find how different events started happening, different events. You can find different events there in Shakespeare's lifeline. You can see several dramas. You can see the Globe Theatre being open. You can see several other events, like for instance, remember the important drama 1604, King Lear and Macbeth being written. Okay, in the second folio. You can see several other dramas in the first folio. Henry IV, part 1, 2, and 3 was written. Okay. Titus and Renaissance, very important. Richard III. So all very important chronicles you can find along with this drama, Romeo and Juliet. Very important. It's kind of a tragic comedy in a way. It is tragedy, but you can find some comic elements. Okay, but mostly it is tragedy. It is very interesting. Okay, but in the third folio, later period, you can find some dramas like Cymbeline, Winter's Tale, The Tempest. Okay, Antony and Cleopatra. Now, there are two divisions apart from these folio divisions, like Shakespeare wrote his dramas in three folios, first, second, and third. I'll come to this. But this, apart from these three folios or three segments, you can find two spheres of writing, two important period, political period. One is the Elizabethan Shakespeare, and second is the Jacobean Shakespeare. Because Elizabethan Shakespeare, during the period of Elizabeth, what Shakespeare produced, okay, had its own political connotations. So he produced dramas till 1600 that could be counted as the Elizabethan Shakespearean drama, and later, since 1603 or 1600, the Jacobean period began. So you can find the Jacobean Shakespearean drama. Okay. So this is basically the brief idea about the period of Shakespeare. In the Elizabethan Shakespearean period, or in the Elizabethan period, you can find the collaborations of Shakespeare, or somehow the collisions between the university wits, who were the university graduates, and Shakespeare, because the university wits sort of used to think that Shakespeare, as he didn't study in university, so he is not a writer who could produce class or who could produce literary ingenuity. So I have already mentioned, Christopher Marlowe, Peel, Green, so they were the university wits, so they had a very strong literary purpose, but Shakespeare had a literary purpose, but Shakespeare couldn't take Shakespeare couldn't simply stake the commercial aspect. Okay, so you can find the writing of Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe in this period, John Lilly and George Peel, the university wits. Okay, you can see the Elizabethan tragedies, very important nomenclature. Elizabethan tragedies being produced. Okay, you have already seen Chronicles, important tragedies being written like Romeo and Juliet. Okay, and important comedies like Comedy of Errors. Jacobean Shakespeare, the Jacobean tragedy started, and obviously the political scenario was responsible for that, the political scenario, because there are so many things happened, okay, after the Jacobean period started. Troilus and Cressida, very much inspired by the War of Treaties, a very important example, because the treaty started also. During Elizabethan period, Elizabeth didn't used to do treaty, but in the Jacobean period, you can find the reflection of treaty in his drama Troilus and Cressida, Two Noble Kinsmen. Okay. So these are the tragedies, these are the comedies written in the Jacobean period.